Hey there everyone, and welcome to some more RPG horror stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about why a game of Dungeons & Dragons needs to be as much fun for the Dungeon Master as the players. A story about a new player that shows no care for other characters, while getting creepily close to another player, and more. But before we get into those, here is Ziggy to help boost our protection against the psychic damage these stories are sure to induce.
Recuerdo dal me gusta comenta y suscribirte. Cadena por favor. Horror.
Ah, there we go. Now I think that we are ready for these stories. My fiancé has no problem screwing over the new Paladin. By Reddit user SushiCat323. I'm not sure that this is too big of a horror story, because everyone still enjoyed the game, but it definitely had the potential. So it was a duo game, just 2 players and me as the DM. The players were my fiancé, that I'm just going to call Dick, who was playing a rogue, and Gary, not his real name, who wanted to play King Arthur, Medieval Fantasy Edition, where he needs to kick a lich off his lands and set up his kingdom. Awesome. Not only do I have a plot hook, I have a whole framework for his backstory to run the campaign on. I also added a plague in the area, where the setting started. This plague was a bit like a zombie or ghoul virus, but the afflicted didn't take the undead subtype, and just shared some attitudes like an undying desire to consume flesh, and a degeneration of mental acuity. So, Dick and Gary head out, and come across a farm where they hear a child crying. Gary, the good paladin that he is, immediately tries to find out what's happened, and finds the kid chained up in the barn, emaciated and starving. So the two head to the farmhouse to find someone to feed the kid, and find out why she's chained up. Though they find nothing, so Dick decides to break in. Dick finds nothing until he opens the pantry, where he finds the farmers, all neatly butchered and hung from the rafters. Dick calls Gary in, and they discuss what to do, and they both agree on 3 things. 1. The child is sick and should be taken to the nearby abbey. 2. They should find some food for the child before they leave. And 3. The butchered farmers should be investigated further to find out who killed them and bring their murderer to justice. But then Dick has an idea that made me put my head in my hands and wonder how much I should penalize the paladin for following along with Dick's idea. Dick's idea was to take the butchered farmers and use them to feed the kid, because they're already dead, so it's not like we're hurting them, and we're saving the girl. And he convinced Gary to do the deed, because, "Ew, no, I'm not touching them, that's gross." So here I am, the Dungeon Master, watching the Paladin feed human to human, and debating on stripping him entirely of his Paladin skills until he repents. I decided to be extremely lenient, as it was Gary's very first game, and he can be a bit easily led. And I know that my fiancé is a dick, hence the name I gave him. So I stripped him of some of his powers for a week, with a stern warning of, "Don't do anything like this again," from his god. I had to follow it up out of game by saying, "By all rights, I should have taken all of your paladin abilities for that. Maybe don't listen to all of Dick's ideas in the future." He readily agreed, although Gary and Dick said that they enjoyed the game and looked forward to continuing it. I did consider some kind of DMPC, just to counter some of Dick's more heinous ideas, but I ended up not needing to though. Yeah, that is a bit of a non-paladin thing to do. What I don't understand is why Dick thought that feeding the child other humans was the best solution. You would think that they would have some rations with them as they are traveling adventurers, and that they could just give the kid some of those. I do have to agree with OP in being a bit lenient with Gary and not stripping him of all of his abilities. Though I will say that perhaps, as the DM, OP should have said something before Gary agreed with Dick's plans, and warn him that losing abilities would be a possibility, especially seeing how Gary was new to Dungeons & Dragons. Overall, not that bad of a story, considering it sounds like the game continued and everyone had fun with it. And at the end of the day, that is all that matters. Let's move on. Ending the Campaign Early by Reddit user Writing Badass. I'm the Dungeon Master, and it's my first time running a long-form campaign. My players and I have been at the table for about 5 months now, and we've had some general issues that I thought were just the table learning how to play together. Several people were new to D&D, or new to 5e, and I tried to give everyone as much grace as I could. Unfortunately, the last session broke the plot that we've been building to. They went straight to the enemy's main place of business, killed a bunch of people, including innocents and non-combatants, and destroyed it. The enemy they were facing has a lot of political power, which I established. The establishment they destroyed was a legitimate place of business, even if it was used for shady purposes. They had just been marked as heroes of the city for doing the leaders a real solid, and they'd just been given a house in the city for what they've done. They took that title, and they went and basically declared open war on a delicate situation, and there's no real way to recover the plot at this point. Worse than that, I don't have any desire to fix it. Last night at the table showed that a lot of the issues I thought we had gotten past, like hiding things from the rest of the crew, talking over me as I'm setting things up, and refusing to work together, just all showed back up. Some examples. They wanted a base. After some time, they earned one, but they refused to put together any coin to furnish it in any way. They wanted a bag of holding, and found it on the adventure that they had just finished, though the person who got it identified won't tell anyone else what it is, so no one else knows that they have one. One of the players also had a vision of plot to come, but didn't tell anyone in the party. I like working with chaotic players. My siblings and I take turns running one-shots for each other, and it works out because we want to work together and have fun. Though I can't handle chaotic evil players that just exist to tear down what I'm working to build though, and I think I'm done with this campaign. There was also a measure of disrespect running through this as well, and I had to have a serious chat to talk to them about not constantly making jokes about boundaries that I set. Then in response, I've gotten buzzkill and Karen comments. I think asking people to stop joking about killing and eating the party dog shouldn't prompt that response. Killing and eating the dog? Yep, I am totally on OP's side here. Those players were the worst. But seriously, it sounds like OP isn't having any fun as a DM for these players. And in my eyes, the DM is supposed to have fun as well while playing D&D. Unfortunately, it turned out that basically all the players were murder hobos that just wanted to blow everything up. Which, those types of campaigns can be fun, but it sounds like OP wanted to run a long-form, semi-serious game. Normally, I would say to talk to the players first before deciding to scrap the campaign entirely. But by the sounds of things, OP already tried that, and the players used some basic bitch insults to throw it back into OP's face. So yeah, I would say just end it if you aren't having any fun. And I promise the dog comments had no bearing on my viewpoint here. Well, maybe a little bit. But let's move on. And before we do, I need to give a quick warning for the next and final story of the day, as it does contain SA. So if you would like to skip this one, you can end the video here, and I'll see you next time. Otherwise, let's get into it. That Guy Murders Characters in Game and Assaults Out of Game by Reddit user NoBid7487. This isn't necessarily my horror story, but I was witness to part of it. In my first real D&D 5e campaign, we had a regular group that would meet weekly, and the game lasted for a couple of years. The cast is our DM Jake, Jake's wife Amy, Amy's boyfriend Boyle, Diaz, and me. Jake, Amy, and Boyle were in a polyamorous relationship and occasionally would introduce a new real-life girlfriend, boyfriend, or love interest into the game as almost a litmus test of compatibility. That guy was hands down the worst. Amy introduced us to Scully, made sure we were okay with him joining the next session, and we made our plans. She had met Scully on a dating app, but they were not anything official yet, just texting and flirting. His first and only session fell on Diaz's birthday. We had cake, a nice dinner, then dice hit the table. He insisted on sitting next to Amy on the far side of the table, scooting his chair over until their sides were pressed together, and she was kind of stuck in a corner, trapped between a wall, the table, and him. Scully was playing a wizard. Cool, we didn't have any dedicated casters in the party yet, and he was described as a slender, breathtakingly beautiful elf with glowing purple eyes and long flowing silver hair. He was a changeling and gender fluid, often changing between male and female, but always describing how gorgeous he was and how short his robes were, showing off lots of pale thigh. Okay. Our reoccurring BBEG had pulled a goblin rat ship into the harbor of this small town. The monsters were pouring out of their rotten hive to loot and sack the town. Our regular four, Paladin, Fighter, Rogue, and Bard, were chopping through the waves of low-level goblins towards their source when Scully entered the fray. An ethereal, lovely elf leaped over our heads, her short wizard robes flapping and giving an anime-style panty shot. Scully detailed her lacy pink thong, her porcelain pale legs, and perfectly curved butt before landing and dispatching all of the enemies with an AoE spell. Scully primped and posed, making a big deal of how she had saved us, and agreeing, without a word from us, to follow and protect us from this threat. Diaz and I exchanged weirded out glances, but didn't say anything. It was Amy's date, and we didn't want to be rude. We battled on through the town, Scully taking every opportunity to showboat, flash people, steal every kill, and make a huge deal of how pretty and powerful they were. As we got closer to the rat ship, Diaz and I split off, riding our dire pug past throngs of enemies to get to the boat while the rest of the party drew attention away. We were a gnome bard and a halfling rogue, so we hoped that we could be sneaky and small and try to destroy the source of this invasion. Indeed, our roles were successful, and we managed to slip through their forces and board the tangled mass of wreckage that formed this floating city. Jake's goblins usually used a lot of explosions, throwing grenades, and having a chance for every slaughtered goblin to possibly have a bomb on it. Diaz and I were therefore not surprised to find gunpowder and bombs within the ship, but we were shocked at the sheer mass of the stockpile. We quickly realized our original plan to sabotage and blow up the ship was a terrible idea, because the resulting explosion would turn this town into a crater and probably TPK the party. While we spitballed ideas of how to push this boat back out to sea, the rest of the party came up on their bloody, long path and finally caught sight of the harbor. Scully eagerly described how he raced forward until the ship was in range and hurled a fireball at it without preamble. "Wait, what? No," we protested. "Half the party is on here." "My character doesn't know that. I'm just doing what my character would do," Scully said as he kept insisting on this course of action. Jake was hesitant, but didn't want to take away player agency. He reluctantly allowed the action and made a couple of rolls, wincing at his results. He had rolled to see if the wooden ship caught fire, and where, and how many turns we had to escape. It was all bad news, and we only had one turn to try and get out before the explosion happened. We did manage to get within sight of a window before our time ran out. We tried dexterity checks to dive out, while Jake rolled damage for this mountain of gunpowder. I barely managed to get close enough to the window that the explosion flung me out into the water with negative HP, but Diaz and our dog mount Aegis were dropped instantly, one-shotted with no death saving throws. Diaz, seeing the character she had played for more than a year murdered on her birthday, burst into tears and left. I followed shortly after, with Jake ending the session with a look of guilt on his face. Over the next few days, our friend group texted in a flurry about what to do, because we had established long ago that what happened in games would not be randomly retconned, and Amy piped up that Scully would not be returning. Not because of the incident, but because Amy had rejected him. Unknown to us all, he had been groping Amy beneath the table all game long, pawing at her thighs and trying to slip his hand into her skirt. She had frozen up, not wanting to cause a scene by calling attention to it, and feeling embarrassed and ashamed by the situation. I was so very angry and feel guilty that I didn't notice how withdrawn she was. Everyone else exclaimed similar rage, guilt, and sorrow. We would have torn into him like rabid dogs if we had known. It hurts that Amy didn't think that we would defend her, but trauma affects everyone differently. After the session, he was pushing for her to go into the bedroom with him because she had invited him over and he felt entitled to sex and seemed to think that polyamorous was a synonym for slutty. He lost his mind when Amy wouldn't give him what he was owed, and Jake kicked him out, but Jake hadn't known then how inappropriate Scully was being earlier. Afterwards, Scully exploded over text, flip-flopping between apologies, self-pity, slut-shaming, demands, and insults, like an incel metronome. Amy is empathetic and caring to a fault, and actually tried to apologize, explain her point of view, and reassure him that no one hated him. She was trying to resolve the situation with minimum damage, despite being the victim, internalizing some of the misogynistic bullshit that maybe she had led him on. Scully then declared that we were all toxic and horrible, and blocked us all before we had a chance to confront him. 100% fuck that guy. Thanks only for the extensive lesson on spotting red flags. Jesus, talk about a scumbag. Not only coming in as a guest and maybe, and emphasis on maybe, a new boyfriend for Amy's poly relationship, then proceeding to not show any care for the other's characters and literally blowing them up. But the worst thing here is that this dickhead was assuming that just because he was invited, that he was entitled to do all that crap to Amy under the table and then demand sex after the game. That in no way was ever a guarantee, and after that, the cops needed to be called and the scumbag needed to be arrested. This creeper seems like the kind of dude that would demand sex after a first date because he paid for the 5-layer burritos at Taco Bell. And I guess he knew that he would have a storm coming his way after all of this, via Amy's friends finding out about it, seeing how he blocked everyone after this. Remember, if anyone ever does anything like what Scully did to Amy to you, make sure to demand that they stop, and always tell someone. No one is ever entitled to that, and anyone who ever thinks that they are and does something like this, they need to have the book thrown at them. And I'm not talking about the player's handbook here. Though, to end on a lighter note, OP did state in the comments that Diaz and the DM were able to come up with a canonical way to bring Diaz's character back to life, and back into the game. Though, unfortunately, the pug mount did not make it. Now, I realize that this is the end of the video, but I think we could all use a kitty palate cleanser after that one. There we go. That is a little better. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.